Welcome everyone to another edition of the Classic Comic Archive, a series where I recap and review many of Marvel Comics' most seminal early issues. Our story for today is Tales to Astonish 35, cover dated September of 1962. This issue marks the second appearance of Hank Pym and the first in his costumed identity of Ant-Man. The issue was written by Stan Lee and Larry Lieber and drawn by Jack Kirby. Our issue opens up with a striking splash page that's teasing Ant-Man's first costumed adventure. But before we can witness such an eventful outing, we must first travel back to the events of Tales to Astonish issue 27. It was in that story that Hank Pym first tested his incredible shrinking serum on himself. Yet its effects were stronger than he expected, and it reduced him all the way down to the size of an ant. He then accidentally stumbled into a teeming anthill and found himself being stalked by its inhabitants. He eventually escaped this nightmare and was able to reach his enlarging serum, which returned him to his normal size. From there, he destroyed the last of his formulas, as he felt that they were too dangerous to exist. Yet only weeks later, the scientist changed his mind and concocted a second set. But he didn't use them, instead he hid them for safekeeping, waiting for the day that they might be needed again. With that, Pym shifted his focus to the study of ants, as his especially close encounter with the insects had sparked within him an interest in them. Through his research, he became particularly fascinated with their uncanny ability to communicate with one another. He eventually came to believe that they accomplished this through the transfer of electrical signals sent between their antennas. And that with the right equipment, a person could access their specific wavelength and actually contact them. Thus, after several months of hard work, Pym crafted a special helmet to do just that, as well as a protective suit to shield him against any bites or stings in the process. But to fund all of this personal research, he also lends his scientific expertise to the US government. His latest project for them is a revolutionary new gas which can render a person completely immune to radiation. But with that, the issue then shifts forward several weeks later and to an unnamed hostile nation. There, a military official informs his commander of Pym's progress on the gas. Recognizing the military advantage it'll give the US over his own country, the commander orders for a contingent of sleeper agents to be activated and then steal Pym's research. Thus the issue shifts back to the scientist's laboratory as it's being breached by the agents. They first subdue several of his assistants and then confront Pym in his personal office. They demand that he hand over his work, but the brave scientist refuses, forcing them to search the building themselves. The agents then leave his office, but post an armed guard outside to prevent him from escaping. Yet it's then that a novel idea pops into Pym's head, and he begins changing into the experimental uniform that allows him to speak with ants. He then accesses the hidden safe holding his shrinking serum and drinks the formula. Now reduced to the size of an ant, Pym next rushes to a nearby ashtray which he had already placed a rubber band tightly around. Using the band as an oversized slingshot, he's able to launch himself onto a windowsill and then head outside by climbing down a pre-positioned strand of thread. From there, he travels deep into the same anthill he'd accidentally found himself in months ago. Inside he encounters several ants, but manages to remain hidden and observes them from afar. As he is, the antenna on his helmet suddenly start vibrating, confirming his theory that the insects communicate through electrical signals sent between their antennae. Yet Pym's forgotten that the ants also have a keen sense of smell and thus detect his presence. Knowing that they'll kill him otherwise, he fully activates his helmet and begins transmitting his own electrical signals. His are stronger than the ants, and they thus begin cowering in fear. Yet a lone ant, the strongest of the workers, is not afraid and lunges at Pym. But to the scientist's surprise, he easily overcomes the insect and effortlessly hurls it away. Thus he concludes that his shrinking serum has only affected his size, but not his strength. Yet the strong ant is resilient and quickly recovers to once again attack Pym. This time it manages to prick him with its razor-sharp mandibles. But his suit is made of a tightly woven steel mesh, protecting him from any damage. Yet his opponent isn't so lucky, as it only takes a single well-placed judo blow for Pym to take it out. With the strongest of the ants defeated, he then increases the power of his electrical signals and discovers that he can now control them. Thus he leads an insect army out of the anthill and heads for the laboratory, but is quickly intercepted by a beetle, which to him is now the size of a dinosaur. Thinking quickly, Pym uses his full-size strength to dig a deep hole in the ground. The beetle then lunges at him, but he dodges just in time, sending the insect tumbling down the hole. He then fills it in with loose dirt and mounts an ant to continue his rescue mission. He rides the insect as it climbs up the side of the laboratory and to a window. Peering through it, he finds that the agents have gathered together all of his research and are planning to blow up the laboratory with his helpless assistant still inside. Thus he and his ant scurry under the just barely open window and rush to save his assistants. They first reach a man named Tom, who Pym attempts to speak with, yet his voice has become so tiny that he cannot be heard. Thus he next climbs onto Tom's hand and attempts to untie the rope that's bonding him. But of course Tom assumes that the creature crawling on his hand is an insect, and thus he shakes off Pym, sending him careening towards the ground. But as Pym's falling, he's able to activate his helmet and order his ants to create a living cushion that breaks his fall. Then from the ground he manages to fully untie not only Tom's bonds, but those of all of his assistants. Yet the hero's work is only half done, as he now needs to deal with the agents. So he transmits a powerful electrical signal, and within moments, a massive swarm of ants enter the laboratory and begin attacking the agents. As the operatives then begin reeling from countless stings and bites, Pym orders a contingent of honey ants to crawl into their guns and clog them up. Realizing that the agents' weapons are now jammed, Pym's assistants rise up to deal with their captors fist to fist, although they really have no clue what's going on. Pym trusts his assistants to defeat the agents, giving him an opportunity to return to his office and change before anyone starts searching for him. Thus he mounts onto an ant and is ridden into his office, where he pours his enlarging serum into a small bowl. He then dips into it and is returned to normal size, at which point he hurriedly changes into his lab coat. Then heading back into the laboratory, he finds that his assistants have already subdued the agents and have called for security. With that, the issue subsequently ends, as we see Pym walking alone down a deep corridor, secure and knowing that his secret is safe, but unsure if he'll ever have to become the Ant-Man again. That concludes Ant-Man's first appearance in Tales to Astonish 35 and another episode of the Classic Comic Archive. But as always, I would like to offer a brief review of this issue. Overall, I thought that this was a great introduction to Ant-Man, even more so than most origin issues, as this story did an excellent job of establishing our hero's powers in an interesting and exciting way, instead of a dull demonstration or explanation. But admittedly, the agents were not very compelling villains, yet just like Wong Chu in Iron Man's first appearance, they fulfilled their purpose well enough. Thus I'm left rather excited to read the coming issues in this series, although maybe I should dampen my expectations, as Ant-Man, perhaps more than any early major Marvel character, has a particularly poor rogues gallery. But in any case, let me know what you thought of this issue and the video, and feel free to suggest other classic comics for me to cover. Thanks for watching.